Welcome to Horrible Fates, where the most unexpected and tragic endings to seemingly ordinary lives are examined. We will take some time to explore the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of everyday existence. Keith McAllister was a 61-year-old married man from Long Island, New York. Keith was described as being a beloved husband, father, stepfather, grandfather, and a good friend to many. It was July 17, 2025. Keith and his wife Adrian would make their way to the Nassau Open MRI facility located on Old Country Road in Westbury, New York. Westbury is a village in the town of North Hempstead in Nassau County on the north shore of Long Island. Inside the building, Adrian Jones McAllister found herself lying on a table. The low, constant hum of the MRI machine was the only sound in the sterile room. The sound was so commonplace to the technicians at Nassau Open MRI that they no longer heard it. To Adrian Jones McAllister, the sound of the MRI was a necessary inconvenience. It would be the last little hurdle before she could go home. Following her MRI, Adrian asked the technician to retrieve her husband, as it wasn't easy for her to get up off the table on her own. The technician gave a friendly laugh as he stepped out of the room. "Keith," Adrian called, her voice echoing from within the MRI suite. Her husband, a sturdy man with a friendly smile, soon appeared within the doorway. Swaying around his neck was a heavy 20-pound metal chain and lock that he used for weight training purposes, an accessory that was familiar to those at the facility as Keith had worn it on previous visits. Keith presented a warm smile to his wife as he proceeded to step inside the room. No one knew in the moment, but that step was about to change everything. The moment Keith crossed the threshold, the MRI's invisible, powerful magnetic field seized the chain that was dangling around his neck. Adrian let out an audible gasp as she witnessed the machine snatch and pull her husband in. The innocent chain had transformed into a lethal projectile, violently ripping Keith and slamming him up against the humming machine. Keith struggled against the unforeseen magnetic pull. The technician and Adrian both scrambled frantically, trying with all their might to pull Keith free, but the force was simply too great. Adrian began begging the technician to turn off the machine. "Please, do something," she cried out, tears welling up in her eyes as she tried to find a way to free her husband. "He went limp in my arms," Adrian would later recount. The magnet's pull on Keith inevitably became a fatal embrace. Emergency responders would arrive to the scene, and they did all they could to try and free the man. For nearly an hour, Keith was pinned to the MRI machine before they finally were able to free him from its clutches. Keith was then rushed to the hospital nearby. Doctors and staff began working on Keith immediately, but as they tried to save him, he suffered a heart attack. This first heart attack was followed by multiple subsequent heart attacks. In the end, Keith's heart gave out. The trauma his body had been put through had been too much, and he was pronounced dead later that day. For Keith's wife Adrian, the image would be seared into her memory. The sound of the humming machine, the friendly, final smile on her husband's face, and the sheer terror when the ordinary became monstrous. It was a tragedy that was both shocking and entirely preventable. A painful reminder of the critical importance of safety protocols in the sterile, unyielding world of medical technology. I want to send my deepest condolences to all of Keith's family and friends. As tragic as Keith's death was, it was not the first death to occur within an MRI suite. This next story takes us back to 2001 at the Westchester Medical Center located at 100 Woods Road, Valhalla, New York. Michael Columbini, a brown-haired 6-year-old with a recent brain surgery now behind him, was sedated and in position for his MRI scan. Inside the control room, a piece of glass separated the small, vulnerable boy's body from the technicians who were preparing for the standard everyday procedure. The scan would soon begin. Michael's vital signs all looked good for the time being. As the thrum of the machine continued on, Michael's oxygen saturation levels began to drop. The anesthesiologist monitoring the situation soon grew alarmed and tried to adjust the oxygen from the wall outlet in the room, but the oxygen was not working as intended. The anesthesiologist immediately got the attention of the MRI techs, both of whom left the control room to investigate the faulty oxygen supply. The anesthesiologist was now alone in the room with Michael, and Michael's vitals were getting worse. Not wanting to leave the boy's side, he began calling out for someone to come help. These pleas for help were eventually heard by a staff member who was walking by the MRI suite door. The staff member, running on instinct, looked around for a solution and saw a handcart with oxygen cylinders sitting not too far away. The staff member scooped up the oxygen tank and, not giving it a second thought, began running towards the MRI suite. As the metal oxygen cylinder crossed into the room, the MRI's powerful magnetic field, an invisible force 30,000 times stronger than Earth's magnetic field, seized the cylinder and yanked it out of the staff member's arms. In that moment, the tank had become a high-speed projectile. It began flying towards the machine at around 20 to 30 feet per second. To put that into perspective, that's around 13 to 20 miles per hour or 21 to 32 kilometers per hour. As the tank closed in on the MRI machine, the anesthesiologist tried desperately to intercept, but couldn't. It only took mere seconds for everything to happen, as the tank struck the still sedated Michael in the head. The MRI room became a scene of horror as staff rushed to Michael's aid, wheeling him out of the room and rushing him into emergency care. For 2 days, doctors worked tirelessly to save the boy. The oxygen tank had caused a horrible skull fracture, and despite surgical intervention, the damage had just been far too severe. Michael would later pass on from his injuries. In the aftermath, the hospital would assume full responsibility for what had happened. But this was of little comfort to the family, who were dealing with an immeasurable amount of shock and grief. Their child had survived a brain tumor, only to have his life ended by a careless mistake. How could this have happened? Michael Columbini was the first known MRI-related death due to a projectile. The tragedy highlighted factors such as poor planning, improper emergency procedures, inadequate staff training, and failure to segregate unsafe MRI equipment. It's hard to say there's any silver lining with this story, but Michael's death would become a catalyst for change within the medical community. Some positive changes made were that hospitals now re-examine their safety practices to ensure only MRI-compatible equipment and oxygen tanks were used. The concept of a 4-zone system for MRI suites gained prominence. Zones are mapped out to restrict access and outline escalating levels of safety risk as one gets closer to the magnet. And enhanced screening procedures were put into place for anyone entering an MRI area. Finally, in 2010, Michael Columbini's family would finally reach a settlement of $2.9 million with the Westchester Medical Center. That money won't bring Michael back, and I'd like to end this story by sending my deepest condolences to all of Michael's family and friends. August 20th, 2017, at the Our Lady of Valm Hospital in Seville, Spain. 25-year-old Rocío Cortez Núñez arrived at the hospital with her husband, Jose, by her side. This was her third pregnancy, and she was excited to bring another life into this world. Soon, Rocío was taken to a room and given a bed. The nurse informed her that a doctor would be in to see her shortly, and so she did her best to try and find comfort in between the ongoing contractions. Fast forward a few hours, and doctors informed Rocio that she was going to need to undergo a C-section. That C-section was a success, and the couple soon welcomed a baby girl into the world. Not long after the birth of her daughter, a porter arrived to transport Rocio to the maternity recovery wing, which was located one level up on the 3rd floor. The porter would pull Rocio into the hallway, and soon they were on their way towards the hospital elevators. When they arrived, the porter pressed the button, and the pair were soon entering an empty elevator. The 3rd floor button was pressed, and the doors began to close, before suddenly they sprang back open. The porter stared on as the doors opened, closed, and then came to a stop with the doors wide open still. Confused and unsure what was going on, the porter then made the decision to exit the elevator and go try a different one. As the porter tried to pull her out of the elevator, the lift suddenly ascended. This caused Rocio's head to become trapped by the doors, while the rest of her body was dragged upward into the shaft. Within mere seconds, the inside of that elevator had become a scene within a horror movie. Firefighters and emergency personnel were rushed to the scene, where they worked tirelessly for over 2 hours to free the young mother. By the time she was released, it was far too late. Now, there are a lot of varying reports on what exactly happened. Some reports say she was cut in half, others say her head was taken clean off. What we do know for certain is that she suffered a severe cranial trauma. In a lot of ways, this story is very similar to the story I covered about Dr. Hitoshi Nikaido, who was a doctor that got his head stuck in a malfunctioning elevator. I honestly can't imagine how horrifying her final moments were. Such a happy day, bringing another life into this world, and to have your life ended the way that it was. It is so sad, and it is so tragic. And as I always do, I want to make sure I send my deepest condolences to all of Rocio Cortez Nunez's family, friends, and more. This next story is about a 5-year-old boy named Thomas Cooper, a curious, energetic, and bright little boy from Royal Oak, Michigan. Like many 5-year-olds, he loved to play and discover, and like his family, he simply wanted to feel his best. According to reports, Thomas had sleep apnea and ADHD, and in a desperate bid for help, his parents brought him to the Oxford Center. The Oxford Center is located in Troy, Michigan. It opened in 2008 after its founder and CEO, Dr. Tammy Peterson, witnessed the healing potential of hyperbaric oxygen therapy on her daughter, Gianna. The center promised Thomas and his family a new kind of relief through hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a treatment where patients breathe pure oxygen inside a sealed, pressurized chamber. It was January 31st, 2025, and 5-year-old Thomas Cooper, alongside his mother, arrived at the Oxford facility. Today, Thomas was going to receive his 36th hyperbaric treatment. Inside the building, a large cylindrical hyperbaric chamber awaited the young boy. He soon climbed in and prepared for what he and his family now viewed as a routine treatment. His mother, Annie Cooper, watched on nearby as the chamber's operator, Aletta Muffet, placed pillows and a polyester blanket inside with Thomas. In the moment, no one seemed to recognize just how critical an error this was. See, in a pure oxygen environment, materials like polyester are highly flammable. To make matters worse, the blanket was fresh out of the dryer, leaving it extremely charged with static. The door to the chamber would soon close, and Thomas would get settled in. As oxygen filled the space, all it took was one small static spark. The blanket erupted as the fire spread explosively fast throughout the chamber. Within a matter of seconds, the hyperbaric chamber became engulfed in flames. Annie Cooper, standing just outside, had to witness the entire ordeal. She desperately tried to save her son, as any mother would, but there was nothing that could be done. She suffered significant burns to her arms in the process, and soon fire and police arrived at the scene. but there was nothing they could do to help. Thomas's life had ended almost as fast as the fire began. Following the tragedy, an investigation found the entire event preventable. The facility made numerous errors, including failing to perform daily maintenance checks and yearly equipment inspections, not having a doctor or safety supervisor on site, and not having a licensed technician perform the treatment. It was also discovered that the Oxford Center had failed to use a grounding strap on Thomas, which is essential to protect patients and equipment from static electricity. Authorities would eventually arrest and charge 4 people in connection with Thomas's death, 3 with second-degree murder, and the 4th with involuntary manslaughter and intentionally placing false information in medical records. The 3 charged with second-degree murder also face alternative counts of involuntary manslaughter, and a jury will decide which charge is most appropriate. The Oxford Center's head, Tamala Peterson, her primary assistant, Gary Markin, and the safety manager, Jeffrey Mosteller, are those charged with second-degree murder. Aletta Moffat, the chamber operator at the time of Thomas's death, was also charged with falsified medical records and involuntary manslaughter. At the end of the day, alleged greed and shortcuts led to one of the most horrible fates I've ever covered. I hope that justice is had in this case, and I want to send my deepest condolences to all of Thomas Cooper's family and friends. If you like the video and enjoy what I do here on the channel, I ask that you take a quick moment to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. With that out of the way, today's story will take us to Holiday Park. Holiday Park is an amusement park that is located in Hablach, Germany. The park was originally nothing more than a fairy tale forest attraction, but in 1971, it went through some renovations and reopened with more rides and attractions before it was renamed Holiday Park in 1973. The park over time would expand from 70,000 square meters, or around 750,000 square feet, to 400,000 square meters, or around 4,305,000 square feet. Over that time, more and more attractions were added, and the location would become Germany's 7th most popular theme park, pulling in around 660,000 visitors a year. In 2010, Holiday Park was purchased by Plopsa. Plopsa is the theme park division of Studio 100. Studio 100 is a Belgian children's entertainment production and distribution company that specialized in high-quality kids and family entertainment content. Currently, Plopsa operates 8 parks across Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and Poland. Following the purchase of the park, Plopsa began implementing kids-focused changes. They added cartoon characters throughout the park, like Maya the Bee, Tabalug, and Vic the Viking. Plopsa would soon announce its intention to invest 25 million euros into the park over the course of the next 4 years. In 2011, the park received a renewed entrance. In 2012, they added an outdoor playland for younger children along with a restaurant, and in 2014, they added the Sky Scream roller coaster. The changes seemingly had a positive impact on the park. As the 2010s continued on, more and more guests were consistently visiting and experiencing the freshly updated attractions. It was August 14th, 2014, when the Walker family arrived at the entrance to Holiday Park. 11-year-old Amber Walker was excited for a day of adventure through the many bustling attractions. By her side was her mother, Claudia Walker, a German citizen, and her father, Edmund Walker. At the time, Edmund was an active Army Staff Sergeant assigned to the U.S. Army garrison, Wiesbaden. From all reports, the day was going about as well as you could imagine. As the family made their way through the park, they would soon come upon the Spinning Barrels ride. The Spinning Barrels is a breakdance model attraction built by the company Huss. The breakdance model is a type of ride that operates in both fixed amusement parks and as a traveling attraction. Each ride consists of small vehicles, each seating 2 riders attached to the end of short, rotating arms. These arms are connected to a circular base that also rotates when the ride is in motion. The individual cars also rotate and are not flat. Instead, they are mounted at an angle. For the spinning barrel version of the ride, the small vehicles were built to look like wooden barrels. The ride could hold up to 24 passengers in total, and each car was fitted with a lap bar for safety. Amber and her mother, Claudia, would soon get in line for the spinning barrel ride. As the line worked its way up, the pair would approach and walk through the gate, accessing the ride area. In that moment, the pair were expecting to board one of the barrels, but to their shock, the ride would begin moving as they approached. The barrels would start spinning as the mother-daughter duo began yelling at the ride operator to stop. Before anything could be done, Amber was thrown around and knocked beneath the spinning platforms. As the ride continued around, Amber was struck multiple times by the spinning barrel cars. Her mother watched on in horror as there was nothing she could do for her daughter. She screamed to stop the ride, and the operator pushed the emergency stop. A doctor would be rushed to the scene, but Amber had sustained serious head injuries. She would eventually be pronounced dead at the scene. Following the incident, the parents' pain and anger was unimaginable. They actively wanted answers as to why this happened to their daughter. I wish I could say that justice was found in this case, but the ongoing legal battle would be long and drawn out, and closure would be hard to come by for the parents. The first thing investigators discovered was a blatant disregard for safety. The gate to the ride was left open prior to the ride being started, and this led to Amber and her mother being able to walk up to the ride just as the operator started it. On top of the gate being left open, no announcement was made that the ride was about to begin. Any kind of notification would have warned everyone in the area and could have potentially stopped this entire ordeal from taking place. 3 employees at the park, the ride operator, the operations manager, and the training supervisor, would appear in court. The ride operator had not made the mandatory announcement that the ride was about to begin, and in court, he would state that he had never been trained or told to do so. Making an announcement was something he had never done in all of his time as a ride operator. The operations manager and training supervisor would be looked at in this case for neglecting their responsibilities, not only to train properly, but to oversee and make sure that safety procedures were being followed throughout the entire park. When all was said and done within the courtroom, the ride operator was found guilty of negligent homicide. It was found that he had not made sure to secure the gate, and he had not made an announcement that the ride was about to begin. He would receive 0 jail time and receive a fine of around $2,700. The operations manager and training supervisor were found not guilty. The entire verdict left a bitter taste in the mouth of Amber Walker's parents. This was not the justice their daughter deserved. From all reports, numerous ride operators and park staff were spoken to after the tragedy, and it became very clear that safety procedures were not being followed throughout the entire park. The lack of safety training and oversight was clearly evident, but for some reason, the courts did not see this as enough to punish the 3 men any more than they had. Following the first trial, Amber Walker's family would appeal. During the second trial, they did all they could to drive home the blatant lack of safety training and oversight that was systemic within Holiday Park. At the end of the trial, the court would uphold the initial ruling. The court stated it could not prove that Amber's death would have been prevented if the managers had better supervised the operator of the ride. With this final verdict, the long, drawn-out fight was over. No one would see a day behind bars. The supervisors would not face any kind of punishment, and the ride operator would simply pay his fine and move on with his life. On the other side, the Walker family was cracked into 1,000,000 pieces that simply couldn't be put back together. Amber's parents would file for divorce. The death of their daughter and the subsequent trials had just been too much on their marriage. Eddie Walker was quoted as saying, "Every day I have that image in my head. All that blood. It's very difficult." In the end, a young 11-year-old girl with so much life left ahead of her had her life brutally extinguished, and it all could have been avoided. The negligence at Holiday Park was very clear, and yet everyone involved basically got away with it. It's unbelievable to me that Holiday Park has never been held accountable. Their job was to not only provide entertainment to guests, but to provide a safe place for hundreds of thousands of people that visit every year. This tragedy ended a life, destroyed a loving marriage, and seemingly was forgotten by the public rather quickly. I hope, in telling the story, I can bring some more attention to this tragedy. I also hope that Amber's parents are in a better place after all this time. In closing, I'd like to send my sincerest condolences to all of Amber's family and friends. Teegan Marti was born on September 4, 1997, in Parkland, Florida. Parkland is a city in northern Broward County. It's a suburb of Miami and located 42 miles north of the city. Parkland has a population of around 34,000 total residents. Now, there's not a ton of information about Teegan growing up, but what we do know is that her parents, Julie Marti and Dr. Alex Marti, described their daughter as a shy but adventurous tomboy who loved outdoor activities. Teegan was also a straight-A student and had even earned herself a spot in the National Junior Honor Society. Teegan also loved the Travel Channel, and in particular a show on the Travel Channel called Bert the Conqueror. Bert the Conqueror was a show that ran for 3 seasons. It starred comedian Bert Kreischer as he traveled across the United States to experience and participate in various adrenaline-pumping rides, stunts, and local traditions.
America is full of extreme rides, outrageous traditions, and insane competitions.
Teegan loved the show, but there was one episode that really got her attention. It was Season 1, Episode 6, where Bert traveled to Extreme World in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. There, Bert would experience the Terminal Velocity Ride. The Terminal Velocity Ride at Extreme World Amusement Park was an intense free-fall attraction where riders plunged more than 100 feet into a safety net below. The terminal velocity consisted of a tall tower with an elevator that would carry a rider and an operator up to the top. There are some differing reports that state the platform was 140 feet high or 42 meters, while others say riders were dropped from about 100 feet or 30 meters. The rider would be suspended in a harness below the platform. The operator would then release them, and they would free fall, back first, into a safety net suspended roughly 40 feet above the ground. According to the park's website, the sensation was similar to a parachute jump, with the rider landing softly due to the air tubes and suspension system beneath the net. Teegan wanted nothing more than to go on the Terminal Velocity Ride, and she soon convinced her parents to take her. It was July 30th, 2010. For 12-year-old Teegan Marti, this day was a dream come true. She had been waiting for what felt like forever to go on the Terminal Velocity Ride, and now, here she was, standing at the base of the towering structure, her heart pounding inside her chest. Her father, Alex, discreetly captured her radiant smile and wide, hopeful eyes with a small video camera. "Are you certain about this?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of pride and concern. "Absolutely," Teegan replied, her voice brimming with an adventurous spirit. Teegan climbed into the ride's elevator and soon made her way up. At the summit of the tower, over 100 feet in the air, a ride operator awaited her. Teegan was securely fastened into a harness, her anticipation growing with each second. The ride's objective was simple: a free fall into a massive safety net positioned below. A routine signal from a ground operator would serve as the only barrier between the breathtaking drop and a safe landing. On the ground below, Teegan's parents stood, her father with a camera in hand, looking to capture the moment his daughter had been going on and on about for months. 33-year-old ride operator Charles Carnell finished getting Teegan ready at the top of the ride. His only job now was to release her once he got the okay from down below. He had operated this ride many times before. In fact, he had worked at Extreme World for many years and never had any issues. But for some reason, in that very moment, things didn't go as they should. Charles would later state that he blanked out as he pressed the button, releasing Teegan from her restraints prior to the net being in place below her. Teegan heard the click as the restraint let go of her. For a moment, She was weightless as she made the silent plunge. Her father captured it all on camera as he watched his daughter plummet, a tiny figure descending towards the ground before the sound of her impact rocked his world to its very core. The thud was a sound that would forever haunt Teegan's parents as they both let out a scream and began running in the direction of where Teegan had landed. Teegan's mother, Julie, reached her first. Teegan was motionless, her breathing shallow, as blood trickled from her nose and ears. Alex would arrive just a few paces behind his wife. His first thought was, "She's gone," as he collapsed to the ground in disbelief. But Alex was a doctor, and he soon recognized that his daughter was not only still breathing, but she still had a pulse. He screamed for someone to call an ambulance as he began CPR on his daughter's badly bruised and battered body. Paramedics soon rushed to the scene, and Teegan was airlifted to the hospital. She had suffered multiple injuries, including a fractured pelvis, fractured spine, and damage to her spleen and liver. Remarkably, Teegan would regain consciousness, but initially she could only communicate by blinking her eyes as she was partially paralyzed. Doctors would manage to stabilize Teegan, and after numerous days in the hospital, it was determined that she had not suffered any major brain damage, which is miraculous to say the least. The fact that Teegan had survived a 100-foot fall at all was truly a miracle. As Teegan sat in the hospital, an investigation into what went wrong began. It was soon discovered that the ride had worked perfectly fine, and according to reports, there were no issues with the ride itself. The entire ordeal simply came down to operator error. Charles Carnell was supposed to wait until the net was in place and he was given the okay, but according to him, he blanked out and pressed the button too soon, releasing Teegan to her fate below. Charles was soon charged with felony first-degree reckless injury. He would end up taking a plea deal with the Sauk County District Attorney's Office. This plea had Charles Carnell plead no contest to a reduced charge. He was sentenced to pay $268 in court fees and provide a DNA sample. The agreement secured a felony conviction, while Charles was able to avoid serious prison time and fines. For Teegan, the road to recovery was a grueling one, as doctors initially thought she would be paralyzed for life. For months, Teegan was confined to a hospital bed, communicating only by blinking her eyes. Physical therapy became an everyday, excruciating ordeal, but Teegan took on every challenge with a quiet, steely resolve. Progress was agonizingly slow, but there was progress. In time, Teegan began speaking again. She started regaining movement, and before long, she was taking her first assisted steps with a walker. 1 year after the accident, Teegan spoke with a reporter. Her voice was soft but clear as she told them, "It's been hard, very hard." Teegan's parents would end up suing the park, who quickly chose to settle for an undisclosed amount. From what's reported, at the time of the accident, Extreme World was already in foreclosure and facing a $2.7 million judgment in favor of a bank, so this may have motivated the park to settle with the family quickly. Following Teegan's accident, Extreme World Park would close its doors and never reopen. The site was eventually purchased and redeveloped into a new attraction called Canyon Creek Riding Stables, which continues to operate today, but the site no longer functions as a traditional amusement park. Teegan will spend the rest of her life dealing with issues from her fall, but her journey is a potent reminder of the fragility of life and the indomitable strength of the human will to survive and overcome. As I always like to do, I want to send my thoughts and well wishes to Teegan Marti, as well as all her family and friends. November 16th, 2024, at the Mixi Shopping Mall in Jinying City, Shandong Province, China. According to reports, this new mall in China had only been open for about 2 weeks before tragedy struck. A 14-year-old girl was waiting in line at a restaurant on the 4th floor of the mall at around 8:30 p.m. While waiting, the girl decided to find a spot where she could sit down. She soon made the decision to perch herself on top of the handrail for the escalator. She maintained her balance by allowing herself to lean against a glass panel barrier that was located in the corner beside the escalator. As she continued focusing on her phone, the handrail slid her around, which forced her to put more weight and pressure on the glass panel. The panel, under too much pressure, eventually gave way. As it did, the young girl lost her balance. The moving handrail of the escalator would then push her torso through the now open corner beside the escalator. She was unable to grab a hold of anything within reach and disappears out of frame, plummeting 4 floors to the unforgiving concrete ground below. An eyewitness to the event described hearing a loud bang as the girl hit the floor. Police and paramedics were called to the scene, but reports state it took them over 10 minutes to arrive due to heavy traffic on the route to the mall. She would eventually be rushed to a nearby hospital, but sadly, the damage to her head was too severe, and she passed on from her injuries. Now, there's not a lot of information about the investigation after the incident. According to reports, the mall had just recently opened and had a safety inspection only 10 days prior to this tragic event taking place. This next story dives into an incident that transpired in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Virginia Beach is a coastal city that is located in southeastern Virginia. It lies where the Chesapeake Bay meets the Atlantic and has a 3-mile-long boardwalk located along the ocean. It was Saturday, January 27, 2024, at around 6:50 a.m. A 57-year-old man was seen driving a red Nissan Kicks that had no license plates. As onlookers watched, a few would pull out their phones and record what was about to transpire. The man would drive the car straight for the wooden pier located near the oceanfront on 14th Street. The following footage captures the man's final, desperate moments.
He doesn't drive off the edge?
Oh my god.
No way.
As you can see in the video, the man drives the car onto the pier and begins to head straight for the end of it. You can see him use the brakes a few times before finally plunging off the end of the pier and straight into the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. Police and fire department would be called to the scene, but due to dangerous water conditions and lack of visibility, there wasn't much that they could do. Officers would end up using a form of sonar in order to pinpoint the exact location of the car that was now completely submerged within the waters below. Over the course of the next few days, numerous attempts would be made in order to locate and recover the car. It wouldn't be until Friday, February 2nd, that an attempt was successfully made. At 9 a.m., a diver entered the waters and the man that was in the car was located and pronounced dead. By 9:48 a.m., the car was finally recovered and the investigation into what transpired would begin. From all reports as of now, the police believe the man chose to take his own life. The name of the victim has not been released by the police, but the police were able to identify who the man was based on the missing persons report that had been recently filed by his family. My primary reason for sharing this case is to highlight mental health struggles. We all go through them. The brightest of days can give way to the darkest of hours, and I want to remind everyone not to be afraid to reach out for help. This man was apparently at an extremely low point, a point where ending his life seemed like the best option. I myself lost someone who was basically my brother. He took his own life, and following his death, I went through a lot of low points, but I finally got the help I needed. There is no overnight fix. You have to work at it day in and day out, and surround yourself with those that truly love, support, and can uplift you when you need them. This story takes place on August 31st, 2020. Ronnie Mcnutt, a 33-year-old Army Reserve veteran from New Albany, Mississippi, had served in the Iraq War from 2007 to 2008. After his service, he struggled with various mental health issues, including depression and PTSD. Despite his challenges, Ronnie dedicated himself to rebuilding his life. He secured a job at a local Toyota factory in Blue Springs, Mississippi. However, every day was a struggle for him. A friend remarked that Ronnie had changed after returning from military service, but he never sought professional help. Instead, he actively advocated for other people struggling with PTSD on his social media, showcasing his selfless and generous nature. Ronnie had a passion for comics, acting, and even co-hosted a podcast with a friend called Just Us Geeks. He also experimented with creating YouTube content and live streaming, finding outlets to express himself through his favorite topics and content. In August of 2020, Ronnie faced significant challenges. There was widespread misinformation about the events leading up to his tragic death. One of the most prominent pieces of information was the loss of his job. While I couldn't determine if the job loss directly caused the events that transpired, it's important to note that Ronnie was already in a dark place. His relationship with his girlfriend had been rocky, and she eventually broke up with him. These events led Ronnie into some of the darkest days of his life. He was alone and struggling with severe depression and PTSD, teetering on the edge of despair. On August 31st, 2020, Ronnie's life took a tragic turn. Ronnie, known for his eccentric and enthusiastic personality, had been drinking before starting a live stream on his Facebook account. For the initial 2 hours of Ronnie's live stream, he engaged in conversations with friends and acquaintances. However, what concerned friends like Josh was that Ronnie was playing around with a one-shot rifle, which accidentally discharged during the stream. Josh then attempted to contact Facebook to cut off the live stream, but they refused to help. Josh also contacted the police, who arrived during the live stream. However, fearing for the safety of the apartment dwellers, the police prioritized evacuating everyone from within the building. Despite their efforts to communicate with Ronnie via a speakerphone, nothing seemed to get through to him. As the live stream progressed, Ronnie received a final phone call from his ex-girlfriend. This led to a brief argument on the phone, with Ronnie responding, "Yeah, you want to talk to me now?" followed by, "Oh, that's the way you're going to be?" before the call ended between him and his ex. This final exchange seemed to be the last straw for Ronnie. He dropped the phone on his desk, looked briefly at the camera, and said, "Hey guys, I guess that's it." Ronnie then reached for the rifle that was resting next to him. What happened next was pure horror as the rifle went off and a troubled soul exited this world.
Yeah, you want to talk to me now? Yeah, you want to talk to me now? Oh, is that the way you're going to be? Hey, guys. I guess that's it.
In the aftermath, the live stream remained on Facebook for far too long. Ronnie's friend Josh revealed that it took Facebook 8 hours to remove the video. In that time, it had already gone viral. Numerous internet users copied the video and re-uploaded it on various platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. These social media sites struggled to remove the footage because people found ways to hide it within videos to evade detection from the site's software designed to locate and remove the extremely violent content. To this day, the unedited video still exists in the dark depths of the internet, and I highly recommend you don't try to find it. It's something you simply cannot unsee. Now, as with the first story, if you're struggling with a mental health crisis, please reach out for help. Mental health has had a stigma attached to it for far too long, and my hope is that within the rise of platforms like BetterHelp and Talkspace, we can continue to raise awareness and encourage more people to seek help. I personally believe that mental health support should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their location or insurance coverage. No one should have to go into debt to get the help they need. However, for many, this remains an obstacle. Also, as a country, we drastically need to do more to help veterans. I live in North Carolina now, and the amount of veterans I see panhandling sickens me. There are so many that have fought and sacrificed for the freedoms we have. Our freedom of speech, our freedom to come home to our families every night in a country that allows us to pursue what avenues and dreams we want to pursue. A country that allows someone like me to make content on YouTube for all of you. Veterans need our help and deserve top-of-the-line mental health care. Every human being deserves top-of-the-line mental health care. In closing, I apologize if I come across a bit too preachy, but mental health-related topics are something I'm extremely passionate about. Also, in diving into stories like the last two, I want to do all I can to spread more awareness to the topics of mental health, PTSD, depression, addiction, etc. If you need help, please reach out to family, friends, and a professional. While a dark cloud may temporarily cover the sky, the vast, clear sky is always there behind it. Depression operates within you, but you are not defined by it. As always, my thoughts and prayers go out to all the victims and their families. Axel Steenberg and his wife Amy both lived in Amsterdam, New York. Amsterdam is a city situated in Montgomery County, located on both sides of the Mohawk River and the Erie Canal. Its name originates from the famous city within the Netherlands. It's approximately 30 miles northwest of Albany and 60 miles east of Utica, and has a population of around 18,000 residents. It was 2018, and Amy Steenberg's 30th birthday was fast approaching. The pair talked things over, and Axel wanted to do something fun and exciting for his wife's big day. Axel would soon begin making plans with family and close friends to travel to the Ommegang Brewery. Ommegang is a well-known brewery located in Cooperstown, New York. The brewery specializes in Belgian-style ales. It was founded in 1997, and it became very well known for its creative beers that draw inspiration from Belgian brewing traditions. Axel continued calling and texting friends and family, and it wouldn't take him long to put together a sizable group of people, all eager to make Amy's celebration a day they would never forget. Axel then arranged for a party bus to provide transport for the group. With all plans seemingly in place, all they had to do now was wait for the big day. That big day came on the morning of October 6, 2018. The group of friends and family all gathered at the Steenberg home in Amsterdam. In attendance were 3 of Amy's sisters, Abby, Mary, and Allison King, 2 newlywed couples, Amy the birthday girl and Axel Steenberg, and Aaron Vertucci and Shane McGowan, Richard Steenberg, Axel's brother, Matthew Coons and Savannah Verses, who are a couple that live together, Rob Dyson, the husband of Mary King and an Army veteran, Abigail and Adam Jackson, Rachel Cavosi, a dental hygienist, Patrick Cushing and his girlfriend Amanda Halsey, Michael Ukaj, a Marine Corps veteran, and lastly, Amanda Ravenberg. As the group piled into the Steenberg household, Axel had to break some news to everyone. He had learned earlier that morning that the bus they had booked had broken down and was no longer available. But all was not lost, as Prestige Limousine Services, based in Gansevoort, New York, had arranged for new transportation. Prestige would send a stretch limo, a 2001 Ford Excursion, which had an 18-person capacity to fit the entire group. At this point, the group were just happy that their plans weren't thrown into complete and utter turmoil. At around 1 p.m. that afternoon, the limo pulled up in front of the house, and the happy group of friends and family piled in. The driver then began his trek towards Cooperstown. They were running behind, but the group wasn't about to let a delay derail their plans for an eventful day. As the Ford Excursion left the city, it went west on the New York State Thruway, and then south on New York State Route 30A. For those that don't know the area, New York 30A is a long, winding, tow-lane rural road. Why this route was chosen is still unknown, but investigators would later speculate that stops were planned between Amsterdam and the brewery. Near Schoharie Creek, New York 30A joins New York State Route 7, which the driver then turned left to join. The driver continued on and soon made a right-hand turn from New York State Route 7 onto New York State Route 30 near Schoharie, New York. The limousine then began its 1.8-mile descent towards the T intersection with New York State Route 30A. This section of road has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. Shortly after the limousine made the right-handed turn onto New York 30, witnesses reported seeing it move towards the right shoulder. It then turned its hazard lights on. After a moment, the limousine returned to the road and then continued its trip south on New York 30. There are several sets of signs warning that trucks are not permitted on this stretch of road. The signs advise that trucks use New York 7 instead. As the driver continued down the road, more and more signs would warn about the steep grade ahead. A sign located 850 feet or 260 meters from the upcoming intersection indicates the limit is reduced to 50 miles per hour or 80 kilometers per hour. As the limo came up on the T intersection, It approached the rear of a 2016 Jeep Patriot SUV, which was in the same lane ahead. This SUV was stopped at the stop sign for New York 30 at the T intersection with New York 30A. The occupants of the SUV reported hearing the limousine coming up on them. They later stated that it sounded like a jet engine as it approached them from behind at a high rate of speed. The limousine driver quickly steered left to avoid smashing into the back of the SUV. The excursion then proceeded to blow past the stop sign. It careened through the intersection without slowing down and crossed straight through the east and westbound travel lanes of New York 30A. The limousine then entered the driveway of the parking lot of the Apple Barrel Country Store restaurant. Unable to avoid it, the limo then struck a parked and unoccupied 2015 Toyota Highlander SUV that was parked in a grassy field just adjacent to the Apple Barrel driveway. The limo was traveling at an estimated speed of around 101 to 118 miles per hour or 162 to 189 kilometers per hour. This collision caused a chain reaction as the SUV was propelled straight into two male pedestrians who were standing within its path of destruction. This initial collision slowed the limo to around 80 miles per hour or 128 kilometers per hour. The limo then continued on for about 55 feet before it entered a ravine and then struck an embankment and several trees. When the limo finally came to a stop, it was left completely mangled and sitting within a stream bed at the bottom of the ravine. The first 911 call was placed at 1:55 p.m. Schoharie County Sheriffs, along with the Schoharie County Volunteer Fire Department and EMS, were dispatched to the scene. They arrived swiftly at 1:59 p.m. They quickly surveyed the scene, and at 2 p.m., the severity of the incident was upgraded to what is known as a Level D mass casualty incident. This swiftly invoked much-needed help from numerous other agencies within the region. EMS quickly got to work on the limo passengers as well as the two men who had been struck by the SUV. Remarkably, 2 passengers within the stretch limo were found to still be alive. They were both immediately transported to the nearby Cobleskill Regional Hospital. One of those 2 occupants was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The other was urgently taken by medical helicopter to the closest advanced trauma location at Albany Medical Center. Albany Med is the only Level 1 adult and pediatric trauma center in northeastern New York. Doctors at Albany Med swiftly got to work, and they did all they could, but the injuries were too extensive. The patient passed away later that day. When all was said and done, 20 people lost their lives. All 17 passengers of the limo, including 4 sisters, brothers, significant others, and more, were lost. The 2 men that were struck by the SUV, as well as the driver of the limo and 15 of the passengers, were all declared to have died at the crash site. This event would go down as the worst transportation disaster in Schoharie County history. The only tragedy prior that even comes close to rivaling it would be the 1987 Schoharie Creek Bridge collapse, which ended up with 10 people losing their lives. This tragedy was also the most deadly transportation-related accident within the United States since the 2009 plane crashed near Buffalo, New York, and killed 50 people. On October 6th of 2018, a horrifying tragedy occurred in the little village of Schoharie, New York. But why did this tragedy happen? And what caused so much devastation and loss for so many? Well, the investigation into the events were soon underway. And what was uncovered? Well, it's shocking, to say the least. As we dive into the investigation, let's first start things off with the driver, 53-year-old Scott Lizanickia. From what's reported, Scott slept well the night before and woke at around 7 a.m. on October 6, 2018. At about 10 a.m., Scott left his home in Lake George, New York. He then drove to Saratoga Springs, New York, to pick up the limousine. Prestige Limousine had 4 vehicles, but the only one capable of meeting the needs of the group was the 2001 Ford Excursion. At this point, Scott should have performed a pre-trip inspection of the vehicle, but it's unclear if this was ever completed. Scott then drove the limousine to Amsterdam and picked up the group. Now, Scott held a New York Class A commercial driver's license with double and triple trailer and tank endorsements. He had held a CDL since 1991, but Scott did not possess a transport endorsement. This endorsement is required to operate a vehicle that is meant to transport 15 or more passengers. Digging further into Scott's history, his New York driving record shows 2 traffic citations, one for operating an uninspected private vehicle in March of 2018 and another for operating an unregistered private vehicle in May of 2018. There was a license suspension for failing to pay the fine related to said March 2018 traffic citation, and an accident for failure to yield right-of-way while operating a private vehicle in November of 2015. His license was reinstated on September 7th of 2018 after he paid the fine that he owed. On August 25th of 2018, just 42 days prior to the accident, a roadside New York State police inspection was conducted on Scott while he was driving the 2001 Ford Excursion. The officer noted that Scott did not have a P endorsement to operate the vehicle, and notice was sent to Prestige Limo. That notice declared that Scott was to be taken out of service until he acquired the endorsement. As we know, Scott never acquired this endorsement, and Prestige continued to have Scott drive the limo around. According to Scott's wife, he was in relatively good health, and he only drank beer now and again. Diving further into this, it was found that Scott had recently had a right hip replacement in July of 2017. According to reports within the investigation, Scott was being treated for elevated cholesterol, gastric reflux, and ADHD. This may not sound like much of a problem, but Scott did not disclose any of this on his latest medical certification. Scott's most recent CDL exam was in September of 2018. In that exam, he indicated no medical conditions or health history issues. There was also the question of, have you used an illegal substance in the past 2 years? Scott answered no, but it was found during the autopsy and investigation that Scott was smoking marijuana. If he had divulged this information, he would have not been recertified. Now, there are red flags when it pertains to the driver of the limo, but in the grand scheme of things, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Scott was seemingly sober and capable of driving on that fateful day in 2018. He should not have been driving that limo, as he was not certified, but that is nothing when it comes to the criminal incompetence within other areas of this investigation. Let's now discuss the company that Scott worked for, Prestige Limousine Services. Firstly, Scott Lizanikia had complained about the safety of the company's vehicles in the past. There had been times where Scott had refused to drive a specific vehicle altogether. The 2001 Ford Excursion SUV was manufactured in October of 2000 by Ford. In January of 2001, the vehicle alterer 21st Century Coachwork in Springfield, Missouri, purchased the vehicle. The New York-based Royale Limousine then selected and purchased the Ford SUV, and then had 21st Century Coachwork alter the vehicle into a stretch limo. Royale would own it until 2006, when it was sold to Advantage Transit Group. They owned and operated the vehicle until it was then sold to Prestige Limo in July of 2016. The alteration in 2001 involved cutting the SUV's factory frame and welding an additional 144 inches of frame rail to extend it. This modification increased the vehicle's wheelbase to 281.1 inches or 23.4 feet, and its overall length to 370.7 inches or 30.9 feet. Once it had been altered to this design, the vehicle then met the definition of a bus. To put it all simply, the Ford Excursion's alterations created a heavier vehicle with an inadequate braking system, an unsafe seating and restraint system. Now, you can't necessarily blame Prestige Limousine for the alteration issues. They purchased the vehicle many years after and were most likely unaware of the issues the vehicle could have. But that doesn't mean Prestige Limo is innocent. In fact, their gross incompetence is a leading factor in why this tragedy occurred. First and foremost, the limo's owner, Shahid Hussain, who fled the country after the crash, and his son, an operator of the business, Nauman Hussain, were negligent in operating the stretch limousine despite knowing of its unsafe condition. The vehicle had failed multiple state inspections and was marked as out of service, but the order sticker was removed and the limousine was illegally put back on the road. The limousine's brakes were corroded and poorly maintained. Nauman Hussain was aware of the brake issues and failed to adequately address them. I don't know why they chose to ignore the red flags, but my guess is that it was a combination of laziness and financially not wanting to invest or spend the money. If they take the vehicle off the road, then they are unable to continue making easy money off of it, plain and simple. But there is more, as the stretched vehicle required a federal certificate to operate, which it lacked. In fact, Prestige Limousine had not received any authority to transport passengers in the state of New York at all. I will now read directly from a section of the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation. Prestige was operating without safety oversight and outside the New York State DOT bus inspection program. As an unauthorized carrier, Prestige and its vehicles bypassed the required semi-annual New York State DOT vehicle safety and motor carrier inspections, which must be conducted by a certified New York State DOT inspector. Prestige was also not subject to the compliance reviews that examine whether a motor carrier is adhering to the state requirements for safely transporting passengers and is meeting current safety fitness standards, such as having qualified drivers, maintaining drug and alcohol testing records, and conducting vehicle maintenance and inspection record keeping. Although a New York State DOT inspector eventually examined the crashed limousine and initiated an inspection that began the NOV process to bring Prestige under New York State DOT oversight, the process did not keep Prestige from continuing in business and transporting passengers before the October 6, 2018 crash occurred. This is all very damning to say the least, but there is even more at fault. Mavis Discount Tire, a national known chain, fraudulently gave the Ford Excursion a Department of Motor Vehicle DMV inspection sticker that it should not have received. Mavis did not follow New York State DMV policy-based instructions not to inspect a modified or stretch limousine. Stations like Mavis were to require the vehicle's owner to contact the New York State DOT to undergo a semi-annual bus safety inspection. But that's not all Mavis did wrong, as Prestige had brought the vehicle in not long before the accident for brake work. Mavis charged Prestige, but it appears the work was never actually performed. A former driver for Prestige Limo came out following the accident and claimed that the operators of Prestige performed only minimal maintenance work on their vehicles. After he left the company, he went and reported the vehicle to the state of New York, and that's where the final blame lies. The state of New York and the Department of Transportation failed every step of the way to enforce safety regulations, and they were ineffective in their oversight of Prestige Limo. New York State failed to impound the limousine even after it failed a DOT inspection, simply placing an out-of-service sticker on it, which was later removed. New York State didn't only fall short with Prestige limousines. In 2017, a federal audit was performed and found that New York State Department of Transportation verified repairs on only 1% of the vehicles it inspects, a staggeringly small amount. At the end of the day, so many different things ultimately led to what happened, and in a lot of ways, that 2001 Ford Excursion was like a ticking bomb, transporting passengers around, while at any moment it could have all gone wrong. To summarize a bit, the driver of the limo was not certified to be driving all those passengers on that fateful day. The driver also lied on his recertification, lies that allowed him to pass and continue driving. The limousine itself was modified improperly, and those modifications were a key factor in what happened. Prestige Limousine was found responsible for catastrophic brake failure due to the neglect of mandated commercial vehicle inspections and maintenance by company personnel. Not only did they not maintain their vehicles, they removed an out-of-service sticker from the stretched limo and employed a driver that they knowingly knew was not certified to be driving all those passengers around. Then, you have Mavis, who did not follow proper procedure when it came to the inspection of the vehicle, and even more egregious, they were paid to perform brake work and simply did not do it. We know the brakes played a huge role in what happened, and I truly wonder if they had done the work, could this have been prevented? And lastly, New York State oversight of the company and vehicles failed every step of the way. This tragedy could have been prevented in so many ways, and it is simply baffling to see how much went wrong leading up to October 6th. Finally, Nauman Hussain was arrested shortly after the crash and ultimately indicted in April of 2019 on 20 counts each of second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. In 2021, Hussain initially pleaded guilty to 20 counts of criminally negligent homicide with the expectation of a sentence of probation and community service. This plea agreement was extremely controversial. Criticism from the victims' families was loud and clear as they sought a much harsher sentence. In August of 2022, State Supreme Court Justice Peter Lynch would end up rejecting the initial plea deal. He was very vocal in calling it completely disingenuous and unacceptable. He also pointed to the removal of an out-of-service sticker from the limousine, stating that this was enough evidence to show that Hussein had knowingly broken the law. Justice Peter Lynch would proceed to give Hussein around 20 minutes to decide whether he wanted to withdraw his guilty plea and face a trial or accept a harsher sentence for his guilty plea. Hussein would end up withdrawing his plea and the trial would begin in May of 2023. The jury would deliberate for 2 full days before finally coming to a decision. Hussein was found guilty on 20 counts of second-degree manslaughter. He was then sentenced to the maximum of 5 to 15 years in prison. Following the conviction, Hussein's lawyers would file an appeal. The appeal would not go as planned, as it was ruled that the evidence was sufficient for the jury to conclude that Hussein was aware of the limo's unsafe condition. Hussein's attorney plans to appeal once again, but as of right now, Nauman Hussein is serving his sentence in New York State's Attica prison. The last thing of note would be a report that Nauman Hussein is now battling stage 4 lung cancer. From what's been reported, he hopes to receive some leniency and be released early due to his diagnosis. It remains to be seen if that will happen. This story is tragic in every way. What was supposed to be a wonderful 30th birthday celebration turned into a nightmare for so many families involved, with the worst part being that this was 100% preventable. It's hard to say that there was anything positive to come out of this horrifying ordeal, but there were some positive changes made in the aftermath. Limousines that now fail their annual inspection are taken off the road. Loopholes in safety standards that allowed stretch limousines to operate without federal oversight for decades were finally closed. All new limousines are now required to have lap and shoulder belts at every seating position. Stretch limousines over 10 years old or with mileage exceeding 350,000 miles must be retired, and many more changes have been made to protect the public at large. In the end, this won't bring back the many lives that were lost, but it will hopefully prevent another tragedy like this from happening. In closing, I want to send my deepest condolences to all of the families, friends, the police, fire, EMS, and anyone else that was affected by the Schoharie limo tragedy. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below, find the link to my merch store, my social media links, as well as a link for my membership tier for the channel. For only $2.99 a month, you can help support the channel further, and you get some cool perks to go with it. One of those perks is having your name listed here in the end of each of my videos, so a big thank you goes out to all my Cellar Dweller members. If you'd like to submit a story recommendation, please do so using the email linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to help support the channel is greatly appreciated. And until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.